All in favor of approval of the agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? So we'll move into the confirmation process. So we will give each of the interested parties equal time to introduce themselves to us, and then we will have an opportunity for questions. If one of the Cavendish reps wants to read your letter from the select board, we can do that too. And then once that is done, we have the option to enter into executive session to deliberate. And then we would come out of executive session to vote. Any questions? All right. Which of the candidates would like to go first?
Either way, if you want to.
I certainly can. How do you stand so that you're seen in both spots? I'm known as Wendy McNaughton. You know my paperwork says Wendy Doust McNaughton. I've lived in Cavendish for 15 years. I have 2 kids that are in our school system, and I am a teacher in Rutland County. So all of these things are my motivation for personally wanting to be involved in our education system. My tipping point for what's pushed me for this particular interest at the moment is due largely because I've seen so many possible changes coming both from our state government and from our federal government, that when I realized that our board was not fully supported or represented, this just needs to happen. And I think especially in this current situation where we didn't have anyone run in Cavendish, you need someone who can quickly enter this position. And so I think my background knowledge, both in education and having been to so many board meetings, gone to so many school events, and been involved in our local education system as well, just puts me in a position where I can very quickly try to fill that void for you, and try to assist in whatever we can do best for our local children.
Thank you.
My name is Donovan Nichols. I wager most people don't recognize me at all. I've lived in Cavendish for about 7 years now. My interest was sparked just seeing a lot of commentary and really strong opinions being shared online and within our communities, and a lot of disinformation and disconnects that have been happening. So I'm approaching this from a point of curiosity. I haven't really been involved in any kind of politics or education. This is all very new to me, so I come into it with a very fresh perspective. I work with disabled adults. I've done that for going on 10 years now. So I'm used to working within teams with some pretty different opinions at times. Daily doing conflict resolution. My own experiences with the school system were that I spent most of my time in education and special education. Gateway, Kendall Farm, so schools designed just for that. That's one of the things that I worry most about with a lot of the changes we have coming, is that there's potentially a lot of oversight happening. I mean, across the board, we have no idea what's happening with anything. But I think that students with special needs tend to get overlooked a lot. I have a lot of lived experience with that, the good sides and the ugly of their systems. In the work that I do, I see the way that these policies are affecting real people every single day. And, I think that a benefit to somebody like me who does not really have any experience on these boards is that when I come into this, it's a lot of questions and a lot of learning, and it's fresh eyes from the ground up. I think there's a real benefit to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Let's see. So, yeah, the Cavendish Select Board met tonight at 5 o'clock. So kind of rushing over directly from there, and the conversation really centered out around that. The Select Board being really happy to have more than one person interested, and just the expression of interest from multiple people was really welcomed. Yeah, and then the letter that they wrote is directed to Layne. On 4/7/25, the Town of Cavendish Board of Selectmen met to discuss the vacant GMUHS seat. That's GMU
Should be GMUSD.
SD. Yeah, there we go. After reviewing the information you provided and through discussion at the public meeting, the select board recommends Wendy Douse McNaughton to fill this vacancy. And then it's signed by all the members of the select.
You should all have a copy of that. All right, so now we can start with questions. What I recommend we do is we ask the same question of both candidates. Kind of, you know, same question twice, so it's not back and forth. We don't have to round robin the table unless somebody else would like to suggest a different one.
No, that's, I was curious. That's how we're gonna do it, because it makes the most sense to me.
All right, who would like to start?
All right, I will. You both mentioned changes coming down from state, federal level and potential impacts. How do you see the role of the school board in respect to those?
Just go in the
Straight
order that
up.
you, just go in the order that you.
Okay, sounds good. It's complicated, right, is the start to this answer. But I think the implications that we're going to see on local schools and districts is huge. And so some of that is preparatory in terms of how do we respond now in order to keep the strongest system possible for our students based on sometimes unfortunately a lack of knowledge. Much of that is just staying informed in terms of what the possibilities are so that as a board, we can provide feedback to the people who are making these decisions currently. And then further down the road, there is the long-term planning of how do we respond to these requirements that are going to directly impact our structure and our classrooms and our teachers and our districts and our units, because it will, a good percentage will largely be left to the board to figure out how to implement in the same way that it was left to the towns and the boards with Act 46. It will come down to this board responding to, preparing for, and carrying out whatever decisions are made at the state level.
So I guess just a hard truth that I think that I'm starting to understand is that, you know, this could potentially come with a loss of local control, which I think is something that has been happening for a while anyway. I think that the amount of things that we can do as a school board are pretty limited at this point. There's a lot of very strict guidelines that are being followed. You know, our best effort is being flexible. It's listening to people. It's connecting with people, understanding how they're feeling about it, making sure that those voices are being heard. Because again, my understanding is that, you know, we set some policy, right? And that we just try to represent the communities that we're coming from. But I think that the most important thing we're going to be doing is getting the communities, not just the ones that we as individuals are representing, but getting the communities to actually come together and understand that we might have to do some changes and make some hard choices together, and that we really can't stand on our own as just one town.
Just quick thank you to both of you for doing this. It's nice to know people are interested. I, coming into the board myself fairly recently, I wasn't necessarily aware of how much work happened outside of this room. There's subcommittees that we're all involved in. Those include outreach, transportation, facilities, legislation. Am I forgetting this?
Negotiations.
Negotiations. Policy.
RBC.
Yeah, TRSU. There's a number of subcommittees. And I suppose I was just curious to know, out of those outreach, transportation, facilities, legislation, and the work with kind of the other boards, so TRSU and RBTC. RBT, oh, I did it, okay. Which of those would you be most interested in helping out with, and how do you see yourself contributing to that?
So my primary personal interest would be outreach, both because I think that's what our particular community needs the most at the moment. But also, I think you all have copies of my resume. Before I became a teacher, I was a journalist. And I've worked in multiple avenues of media, so television, news, newspapers, magazines, and through teaching middle school have also brought that in at a much greater technology level and social media platforms. So that would be my personal interest, as well as I think where we need the most support. But certainly my background would lend to anything that's curriculum-based or legislative, or any of the pieces that aren't general maintenance of the building.
Yeah, I mean, so being incredibly new to all of this, I'm not super familiar with all of those spaces, so I'm not going to have a really great answer to give you. I have to kind of get to know those processes better in those areas, and with, again, not having any information on it, I couldn't really speak to it.
Super fair. Thank you, guys.
Scared me for the moment.
Get my turn.
So I've got 3 questions I just to start with. How will you keep your personal opinions and biases separate from your responsibilities as a board member?
So I've been a public school teacher for 17 years in a community that does not necessarily agree with my personal political opinions. And I've never had a parent complain about what I teach those children. My priority is to make sure I fairly understand a situation, and to present what I believe is right in the situation, regardless of what the politics surrounding it might be.
Yeah, I mean, so this is something that I do quite a bit of. Working in what I do, we develop behavior plans for people. I do a lot of documentation and reporting that relies on data that just has to be very strictly about facts. And I have to be very cautious and thoughtful about the biases that I might hold, as that could greatly affect the individuals I support. I think just really focusing on, when you're discussing something with somebody, is that you focus on the topic matter and the policy, and not necessarily responding to or attacking the person if you don't like something.
No.
You can keep going.
How do you plan to work with other board members, especially if there are differing opinions on key issues?
You start by listening to understand rather than talking to be understood. And recognize that it's a process. And sometimes you need to go back and do your own research and take a moment to think something through before you react. And I think generally, if you can set out all of the options in a methodical way, there are times where you just agree to disagree, and there are times where you can find a compromise in that process. And it only stays productive if you keep your head on the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, approaching it from a point of curiosity, asking questions and getting a deeper understanding, being willing to be vulnerable about things we may not know, or that we just may not have been aware of. Again, yeah, I think that it's just asking questions, maybe doing some research, getting a better understanding. Just communication overall, like that's key in a situation like that. When you've got disagreements, I think that there's usually more in common than not if you can get to the core of it.
What is the number one thing on your agenda for the board?
Like, yeah. Is it okay to ask clarifying questions?
Go ahead.
Do you
What's-
mean,
I
like,
guess-
what do I want the board to work on?
Yes.
What's my priority for the board? I would like to say that my priority would be the education and the curriculum itself. But unfortunately, I think we're probably put in a situation right now where that can't be. I think our strategies probably need to be more structural at the moment, more about how do we create community systems that can support our school. And then, of course, what are the routine things that need to continue to function, even if Montpelier is chaos? Because we're the ones who keep it going.
Yeah, I think that a big area of focus needs to be collaboration. It needs to be, I mean, I know that, representatives from each town, might have very different views. I know that in Vermont, our small towns have a very strong sense of identity, and that can be very hard. I don't know a whole lot about it currently. I know that there's some talk about shifting around students, and there's, some overpopulation in some of the schools, and like, these are really hard conversations. And the thought that we're changing any of our schools or potentially lose them is terrifying for small communities. Those are more than just schools, they're hubs for our communities. If there was something in general that is going to be probably a specific area of focus for me, that's going to be on the special education parts of it. I think that there's just an underrepresentation there. And I've seen a lot of good and bad come out of that system. I've experienced good and bad come out of the system. So I just think on the big picture, probably that.
Well, Katie kind of stole the question I was gonna ask, but, you're being elected to represent your town, but we are a unified school district. There's 3 other towns here. Are you gonna be able to make decisions, step away from your town and make decisions that better other schools rather than just your own? Because I've seen it in the past where, certain towns, they'll vote, no, we don't want to spend money over here, but let's spend money in my school.
So the idea behind being a board is that we bring perspectives from other towns and other places. I don't know day to day what it is that Chester needs because I live in Cavendish. And so I will present what I see in Cavendish. I will present what I hear from the people who talk to me and want me to pass things on to the board. My perspective will come from Cavendish. That's my history. But I'm a teacher in West Rutland, Vermont. And what happens to our state school system affects all of the students. My first year of teaching, I had the kids come up to me and they were like, do you have kids? And this was like 17 years ago, right? So I didn't. At that point, at first I was kind of insulted, like, why are you asking me a personal question like that? I finally figured out they're asking me because they wanted to know if I liked children. And so as soon as that clicked, I went, because they would come up again, do you have kids? And I went, yeah, I've got 52 of them. And they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? And then they like look around the room, it take them a second, they go, oh, I get it, because they know in on it. And that is my perspective, right? They are my kids. And whoever I'm supposed to be helping is my children. My daughter didn't go to her ballet dance class tonight because this was important to do. There's gonna be some give and take. And we just do whatever we can for the most of them that we can.
So I don't carry a lot of biases when it comes to conversations about the towns or any particular school. I didn't really get the opportunity to participate in the public school system in any meaningful way. I just wasn't part of it. Family doesn't have deep roots into any particular town. It's as I view this, it is just about the unified district. And it's important as a representative that I do listen to people from the town that I'm in, and I try to represent, what it is that they're concerned about. But I just right from the foundation that I'm standing on, I don't hold any biases. There's nothing I can think of that particularly sways me to be, just biased towards the town that I'm representing specifically. I just don't have it.
question that Rick wants me to ask. This is from Rick Alexander on Zoom. What is your understanding of the relationship between a board and the superintendent?
The superintendent is an employee of the board, and it's the superintendent's role to help run the process that the school board members are elected by the people to carry out. And the superintendent has the knowledge and has the day-to-day interactions that will do those things that the school board needs done. The superintendent does run the schools, but those decisions are made by the school board together as a community representing those within their town.
So again, I'm, really new to this stuff. And obviously going second, I could just kind of BS my way through. That was an awesome response. I definitely didn't have that depth of understanding about it. Again, as I come into this, I would have to do a lot of learning, and I'm open to that.
What are your budget priorities?
Those things that affect the students directly first. So last spring, I was part of this fight you all had to get the budget passed because it failed. Initially, I bought yard signs and put them up in town because it wasn't fast enough for me to wait on the ones the district was posting. And what I appreciated and admired about that process is your conversation across all of you. Very often I heard you respond with, what's the impact to kids? And that's the question you ask when you're looking at a budget, is how will that directly affect kids? I mean, it was in the conversation about whether you keep the Spanish class here. It was in so many conversations I've seen you have. So the answer to this really is an appreciation that I did see the same question I would have asked when I saw you all in that really tight crunch of we have got to get a new budget passed, and what can give. And what can give are those things that we can find, and it's circumstantial. It depends on the time and what's happening and where students are. But it's whatever you can find that will least likely affect students directly within a classroom.
Yeah, very similarly. I mean, supporting children's student outcomes. There's not a lot of other things that we can dramatically affect. I've watched a few presentations, as to, our minimal attack, what minimal we can do on people's property taxes, right? But every time we cut something, that's pretty substantially detriments children. So just, students first.
So the most important lane for us as a school board is not about education, because that's the job of the superintendent and the staff of the schools. And our role, as I see it, is to provide the support that the people that we hire to run the schools can do their job and serve the children. My concern is, as Jeff mentioned, is basically that from all of our variety of towns, that we all come together and support the students in the of all of our schools. And that to me is the most important thing. And I would just like you to address how you are able to do that.
So the changes that are coming from the state and federal government are going to affect all schools and everyone, right? And so if not a single school is going to be able to handle this by themselves. And so if we can work together to come up with some viable solutions, it's going to take more than one town to be able to do this. And whatever change you can make in any school, because this is a statewide change, is going to help all schools. So it has to be done as big a picture as you can.
Yeah, I think that the towns are gonna succeed or fail, and it's gonna be together. There's not really another choice to that. You know, the best, any person can offer to this is to be flexible and just listen.
So it is always a challenge, but we try to make decisions based on the available evidence, and often even figuring out what that evidence is or how to interpret it is quite challenging. So my question is, how do you, for questions that you may know nothing about, like how to fix the boiler or other things like that, when they come up, how do you approach bringing evidence into those decisions?
This is certainly, it depends on what problem you're trying to fix. So there are two avenues in research largely. You either go to the person who has some information about that, and that may be a subcommittee member, that may be the employee of the school. And then you also then go into your research to give you greater context, right? So that means looking up legislation, that means looking up past precedent, that means I'm going to other schools. So you take the human applied information you can get in front of you, and then you try to contextualize it with what has been done in other places. And both as an English teacher and as a journalist, that's what I do, right, is research. And so it's about taking that moment to step back, figure out what can we all bring to the table so that next time we've got options to work with is key.
Yeah, collecting the data, trusting experts when available. Being vulnerable enough to admit that we don't know something is, I think that's a huge obstacle for most people. So just being able to say that we don't know and, find the people who do. Maybe that involves getting a couple quotes in the case of the boiler. And yeah, as was said, researching legislation, whatever it is that we're dealing with that we don't know, is to just really rely on quality resources.
What will be your approach to community outreach and connecting with people in the community?
So very often, I walk down the street in Cavendish or even Chester. Actually, the other day I had a man stop me and he goes, "I know you." And I was like, "Do you? How?" He says, "I know you because you're at every event that I go to, and your two little redheaded children are at every event I go to." I was like, "Well, you must go to them all too." I tell you this because it's just about getting out there, right? It's about being there in all of these places that you can, is the start, just in terms of your personality and your location. And then the next step is trying to find a variety of avenues, right? It's using social media, it's being face-to-face, it's using a newspaper, keeping in mind that different people have access to different platforms, and making sure that you're available through all of these different avenues.
Yeah, just being visible and creating access for people. And I don't know if there are certain restrictions that we work within as a board. I suspect there probably are. So I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, but I'm pretty curious about why it is that it seems like we can't really connect with most of our communities. We look at our Facebook pages or the turnouts at votes, and we're oftentimes maybe seeing 50 to 60 people or whatever the number may be. It's not a lot. I don't know what the exact avenue is, and I don't know where that disconnect is, but, trying social media, trying to, whether it's leaving a specific email address open for comment, or meeting people in the community at events when you can. I think it's going to take a broad approach.
Questions?
Layne, do you have any questions for me?
I gotta recuse myself. It's technically my boss, so wouldn't be appropriate.
Questions?
I have one more. Been touched on a couple different ways at times during this Q&A session. about differing opinions, conflict. And if you've attended board meetings, you've seen that there's sometimes disagreement, differing opinions. If you haven't, sometimes there's disagreement. differing opinions. Sometimes it requires action, vote on the floor, essentially. If something doesn't go your way, how do you respond and move forward with the board?
The answer is, how do you not? I mean, you do, it's not the person, right? It's that moment, it's that issue, perhaps. You didn't agree and you move on. And you work around it. Whatever's decided by the board is what we've agreed. That's the setup, that's the structure, it's how we've agreed we move forward, and we do.
Yeah, I think you take a deep breath because you're probably not terribly happy about that, and you got to work with what you got. You know, you need to just see what your next input is going to be on this new situation, even if it wasn't ideal for you.
Questions? All right, if there's no further questions, we can go into the public comment section.
I must say, I'm so impressed by all these questions. You really took time to think about them. It's wonderful. And the answers from both. It's really a good Q&A.
Yes, I just want to say, I'm super excited to have more than one person. And we just chatted with Donovan at our select board meeting and are excited to have him be interested in joining Cavendish's participation in the TRSU and the GMUSD, and also Cavendish's participation in what we do in Cavendish, because this is the place where we come together, but everywhere else, the lines have been drawn by somebody else, right? Andover has a different rep, we have a different rep, Chester has a different rep, so sometimes we do have to look like who else is participating in our town and whatever is going on. So I think it's great for all towns when we find new people to participate. I'm here in support of Wendy this evening because I know that she has been involved specifically in school-related things, and we have to make a decision tonight. And so, as you said, you know, we move, or as Wendy said, we move on when that decision is made. But I hope that you will support this evening Wendy, who has expressed her interest since we knew after the day of the election that there wasn't a candidate, and who has been super open about letting everybody know about the process and dates and other things. And it's my understanding that you two have communicated as well to help each other just know, oh, we got to get this letter to Layne. The meeting has been changed. It's not on the 8th, it's on the 7th, and working with the select board. So I hope that you will choose Wendy tonight, and I hope that you will look for opportunities to work with Donovan in the future and with whoever else steps up when you all step down at some point.
To executive session to deliberate. You all have it in front of you. If there's someone to make a motion and read them out, please.
Move that we move into executive session for appointment or evaluation of public officer employee 1 VSA S313.
We will not be in motion lane.
I'll second.
Yes, just being clear that we're not in motion lane. So you can just send her an email. Just let me know when we went in. And then you don't have to take a motion, or I can do it. Let me just do it.
You got everybody back. Yeah, that's recording.
Okay, all right, so we have deliberated on the decision regarding the vacant Cavendish seats and prepared to vote. Okay. You're just gonna do roll call? Okay. Amber's back on?
Yep.
All right, starting at the top. Rick Alexander.
Are we just voting names or are we doing a
Names.
motion?
Names, please. Let's keep this.
Donovan,
Jeff Hands.
Donovan.
Scott Kendall,
Donovan.
Casey Leahy,
Donovan.
Kate Lampier,
Wendy,
Katie Murphy,
Donovan.
Lois Curlo,
Wendy,
Lisa Sanders,
Wendy.
Chuck Wonderly.
Wendy.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Donovan, 1, 2, 3, 4 Wendy. Donovan is selected. Cavendish rep.
congratulations.
Congratulations, Donovan. So what will happen now is you are not a board member as of yet. You will need to go to the Cavendish Town Office, take your oath of office. And then I believe it's sent to you. And then you will begin joining meetings. If you get that done in the next 24 hours, there is a policy governance meeting that you're welcome to attend on the 9th. And then they will take care of all the rest, that sort of thing. While I just want to publicly acknowledge the extraordinary conversation that just happened before behind closed doors. I think a lot was addressed. I think we were fantastic. And I'm really hoping that as we move forward, that will continue. I really appreciated that a lot. It got to the point where I do not enjoy coming to these meetings anymore. So, got a lot on your shoulders, Donna. Welcome. If there is no further discussion, we will have our next meeting, the 9th. It's not a meeting, I'm sorry, policy governance, the 9th. And then our next regular meeting, the 17th. Is there any that I'm forgetting?
Is there another policy governance meeting?
So we're gonna talk about that on the 9th. So, the woman that does the teaching, has significant conflict. So we're gonna pick another date for the 2nd meeting.
So there is no meeting on the
As of the
16th.
16th, where yeah, that one's done. But on the 9th, we will pick the next date.
And then policy governance.
Huh?
Here, 6 to 8.
Yes, 2 days from now.
I thought we were doing that with Zoom.
You can,
Okay,
yeah, it'll be both.
okay,
Are you planning on being on Zoom?
yes.
Okay, anyone else? Because there's packets for you to take.
Oh, okay.
I'll take a package.
I'll take one.
Wednesdays are
Yeah.
tough for me. I clicked the little if needed thing on the
It
poll.
didn't work well for me either.
Yeah, rats, guess I'm needed.
Are you Zoom as well?
Yeah.
I think just give them out.
I'm malfunctioning.
So ignore this, ignore where it says here.
I think I've got.
It says TRH board policies. That is not going to be what we're doing. I think that to her credit, she's trying to keep 2 boards doing this clean, and they're crisscrossing. So if it says TRH anywhere, please ignore that. We will be going over board management delegation and governance process. We will not be doing executive limitations. That's going to be the big one. And then I believe the global ends is going to be the super big one. Katie went to the TRSU one. I thought that was pretty painless.
I was
Yeah. All right. Is there any further discussion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Scott and Casey, all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you all for your
What
hard
would they
work
do?
tonight.
All clear? Good night, thank you.